Have you ever wondered why it's so much easier to remember a phone number when you break it into chunks? I mean, take 604-299-9123. We would naturally group it as 3 digits at first, 604. Then another 3 digits, 299, and then 4 digits, 9123, which is a lot simpler than trying to remember all 10 digits in a row, right? Well, that's because your brain loves organizing information into manageable pieces. It's called chunking, and it works wonders in music as well. Stick around, and I'll show you how this technique can transform your teaching and make complex music much, much more digestible. So, what exactly is chunking? It's a strategy first introduced by George Miller in 1956, and it involves grouping information into single, meaningful units to make it easier to remember things. Just like breaking up that phone number. In music, it means grouping notes, rhythms, or phrases so that students can remember complex material more easily. Think of it like organizing your sock drawer. Way easier when you group them by color, right? Now, what's really cool is that musicians naturally use chunking all the time without even realizing it. Scales, arpeggios, chord progressions. These are all chunks. By recognizing and grouping these patterns, students can recall longer sections of music and perform more confidently. It's like assembling musical Lego pieces. You've got the building blocks, and now you can construct something amazing. Speaking of amazing, here's a fun story about one of the greatest chunkers of all time, Mozart. When Mozart was just 14 years old, he attended a performance of Allegri's Miserere at the Sistine Chapel. This piece wasn't allowed to be copied or performed outside of the chapel, but Mozart, being the musical genius he was, heard it just once and managed to write it down completely from memory. How? You guessed it, chunking. But there's more. Mozart had incredible templating skills as well. Templating is when the brain creates a mental framework or pattern from smaller chunks of information. Like a template you can reuse. In Mozart's case, his ability to chunk and template allowed him to recognize musical patterns and structures, organize them mentally, and then recall the entire composition as a whole. It's like having a mental template for how music fits together. Musicians do this all the time, especially with familiar patterns like chord progressions, scales, or rhythmic sequences. They create mental templates that help them quickly recall and apply these musical elements in different contexts. Whether it's recognizing a 2-5-1 progression in jazz or the harmonic structures of a classical piece, musicians rely on chunking and templating to organize and recall complex material. Talk about hitting the right notes, literally. Chunking is a great way to lighten the load on working memory. Now, what exactly is working memory? Think of it as the brain's sticky note. It helps you hold on to information just long enough to use it. Whether students are sight reading, comparing patterns, or performing in ensembles, working memory is what allows them to process and manage these tasks in real time. Chunking helps by breaking down information into smaller, manageable pieces, just like how we break up a melody or rhythm into sections. Let's talk about audiation. Kind of like hearing music in your mind. When your students are listening, composing, or improvising, they're using their working memory to chunk patterns together. Just like in a conversation when you're processing words while listening. It's music's version of thinking out loud. And don't worry, they don't need to fully understand every individual note. Chunking helps them group things for easier comprehension. Chunking doesn't just happen by accident. As educators, we can help students create powerful memory templates by teaching them how to recognize musical structures. Think of it like handing them a cheat code to navigate complex music. For example, expert sight readers don't read every note individually. They recognize patterns or chunks, which speeds up their reading and helps them perform with ease. Here's a little tip for educators. When teaching rhythm or tonal patterns, break them into smaller chunks first, then build on them. Before you know it, your students will be piecing together entire compositions like pros. Now, let's talk about the limits of chunking. Studies show that chunking typically works best with group sizes of about 4 or 5 notes or tones. Any larger, and it's like trying to juggle too many oranges at once. It gets tricky. When we help students chunk material, we need to make sure the chunks aren't too big. Think of it like giving them a musical snack instead of a full buffet all at once. Patterns aren't just in music, they're everywhere. In nature, art, math, and science. Patterns help us understand the world around us. In music, recognizing patterns is key to developing creativity, problem-solving skills, and logical thinking. Whether it's rhythm, melody, or harmonic progressions, patterns are the building blocks that allow students to compose, improvise, and perform. How can we use chunking practically in the classroom? A great place to start is with tonal and rhythm patterns, which are fundamental to music learning. Tonal patterns help students recognize and internalize pitch relationships, while rhythm patterns teach them to understand and feel the structure of time in music. These patterns are the building blocks of melody and rhythm, so breaking them down into chunks makes it easier for students to get in tune with their music and perform more fluently. You can also collaborate with your students by looking at their music together and identifying these natural chunks. You'll quickly see that some students work best with smaller chunks, while others can handle larger sections. This process not only helps them organize complex material, but also gives you valuable insights in how each student learns. Here's where it gets even better. Chunking isn't just great for individual sections, but it also helps with understanding musical form. Think of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. The theme follows an AABA form. A repeats, followed by a contrasting B section. By chunking the piece into these sections, students can see how it all fits together, like solving a musical puzzle. It's a great way to teach form and help them recognize patterns, making the music click in a fun and engaging way. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Chunking is a simple, yet effective tool that can make a big difference in the classroom. By helping students break down complex music into manageable chunks, you're lightening their cognitive load and setting them up for success. Whether it's tonal patterns, rhythm sequences, or even musical form, chunking allows students to organize and process information more efficiently. Plus, it's a great way to build confidence as they realize they can handle complex music by focusing on smaller, achievable pieces. So remember, chunking isn't just a teaching trick. It's a strategy that helps students develop better musical understanding and performance skills. Next time you're tackling a new piece in class, use chunking to make the music more digestible for your students. And as I like to say, don't just plunk it, chunk it. Happy teaching and musicking.